I swear, when I went to the theater to go see this movie, I had never seen a theater so divided. Either you went to go see Arnold Schwarzenegger, or you went to go see Channing Tatum. Terminator Genisys is the 5th movie in the Terminator franchise, and it is supposedly a reboot or a reboot without being a reboot. I'll get more into that later though. I say this because the plot of the movie within the first 30 minutes, it is about, we see the story of Judgment Day and John Connor. But then, just like the first movie, a Terminator and John Connor's son, Kyle Reese, was sent back in time to protect John Connor's mother, Sarah Connor, before John Connor was even born. Now when Kyle Reese, he first hits 1984, he realizes that the timeline is not the same. He sees that the timeline is completely different, and an older version of the T-800, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, was sent to protect Sarah Connor way before Kyle Reese even got to her. And he raises and teaches her how to be the badass that we saw Sarah Connor in Terminator 2. And he's also essentially a father figure to Sarah in this movie. So therefore, the timeline was altered. Now, immediately when I saw that in the first trailer from early last year, I was like, yes, they're pretty much pulling a X-Men Days of Future Past and using the timeline to retcon the bad Terminator movies and to a certain degree, the good Terminator movies. But then it takes another direction that completely compromises the plot of the movie, but that's all I'm going to say about that. Because if you've seen any of the other trailers to this movie, you know a lot more than you should know. And I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen those trailers. Now, I am a huge fan of the Terminator franchise, particularly the first and second film. The third and fourth film, I don't necessarily hate them, but at the same time, I'll be the first to tell you that they do not hold up to the first and second film. The Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day are two cinematic masterpieces, and I have loved them my entire life. Now, I think it's cool that it is a coincidence that in this year, 2015, we get sequels to two classic films, Jurassic Park and Terminator. Jurassic Park and the first two Terminator movies, particularly the second one, are not only fun science fiction movies, but they are important movies that needed to happen in order for us to get to where we are now, as far as special effects go. These movies have pioneered astonishing special effects, particularly CGI. Because without the T-1000 in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, we wouldn't have been able to pull off bringing back the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Now, going into Terminator Genisys, despite my concerns about this movie, I was very excited for it because we get a new Terminator movie, and this could be the Terminator sequel that we all deserved after Terminator 2 Judgment Day. But I can honestly say, it's not. Now, here are my positives and my negatives. First, the positives. The thing I like the most about this movie is the gimmick that Arnold Schwarzenegger returns as the T-800. And I know some people had his doubts about, old Arnold portraying an old Terminator or whatever, and he's being in a Terminator movie, and it will just feel like he's just going through the motions talking about, I'll be back, hasta la vista, baby, everybody get down, I'm the governor. But I can honestly say Arnold Schwarzenegger was not the problem with this movie. He still works as the Terminator, and you can tell, hand over heart, he tried. And you can tell he still has a little left in him as the Terminator. Because you would think it's been over a decade since his last appearance as the Terminator before he went to go be the Governator. Miss Game of Thrones herself, Emilia Clarke, plays a young Sarah Connor. And I can honestly say she wasn't bad in the movie. Is she as great as Linda Hamilton's portrayal in the first two movies? Not remotely, but she was actually good in the movie, and I actually bought her as a young Sarah Connor. And you could really feel the weight of this whole situation bearing down on her, and how she feels about it. And I bought the relationship between her and the T-800. I bought that she was raised by this machine, and she looks up to him as a father, and she even calls him Pops. Pretty much the relationship between Sarah and the T-800 in this movie is the relationship between John Connor and the T-800 in Terminator 2. Another thing I like about this movie is like the first 15 to 30 minutes, it shows from Judgment Day happening to post-Judgment Day to it's pretty much being illustrated how it was in the first two movies, and then John Connor, he finding Kyle Reese and John Connor, they have this relationship, and then they essentially win the war, but then the Terminator gets sent back in time, and so Kyle Reese, he volunteers to go back in time to save Sarah Connor from that Terminator. But I like John Connor in the first part of this movie because he is, in the first 30 minutes, how he was described as a leader in the first two movies. He gave people hope, and he was a good, respectable leader that everyone looked up to and aspired to be like. I can honestly say, Jason Clarke, he is the best adult incarnation of John Connor. Then the rest of the movie happened. Now, this is where I segue into my negatives, and I know I said I wasn't going to spoil much of the plot of the movie, but hey, like I said, it's in the trailers. Go watch them on the trailers, and for God's sake, the spoilers is in one of the main posters of the movie, so. But I gotta talk about it in order for me to really say how I feel about this movie and how I feel about that whole situation. But John Connor, he is one of the Terminators in this movie. And that's how one of my positives all of a sudden turned into a negative, because I don't know, for some reason I hated John Connor as a Terminator in this movie, and essentially the bad guy, because it's like we all grew up with John Connor from when he was a kid in T2 to when he was an unsure of himself adult and trying to find his way, and then eventually he accepts his destiny into Terminator Salvation, which by far Christian Bale's John Connor in Terminator Salvation is my least favorite adult incarnation, but now I think it's Jason Clarke. But I hate that they went that direction, because it's like we all grew up to love John Connor, and now to see him be this bad guy and it just felt out of place, and I hated it. Now let's talk about Jai Courtney. Now look, I have nothing against the guy. I don't think he's a terrible actor. I don't think he's a great actor at the same time, but I don't hate him, and he's probably a cool guy. But watching him in this movie, I honestly do not understand why he was cast as Kyle Reese. Seriously, he had zero chemistry with Emilia Clarke in this movie, and it just felt like he just bitched and moaned throughout the whole movie. And he does not capture the essence of what Kyle Reese is. He's all skinny, he's unsure of himself, but he's also calm, he's collected, he's reserved or whatever. And he'll do whatever he can to protect Sarah Connor. But Jai Courtney in this movie, he was all muscular, he was really one note, and like I say, he doesn't capture the essence of what Kyle Reese is in this movie. The biggest negative about this movie is it tried to be too big for its own good. It had too much going on. The timeline as well as the plot was all over the place and confusing and convoluted. If they had just stuck with the fact that it's Terminator 1 but except with a different timeline, that would have been fine. But then it just took another direction and then another direction. And yeah, there's a lot more to the plot than just the whole John Connor situation, but I'm not going to spoil any more past that. But ultimately, this movie is a mess, and I swear to God, I have not seen a movie all over the place since Jupiter Ascending from earlier this year. Hell, J.K. Simmons is in the movie, and I like the concept of his character, but ultimately his character was wasted, and J.K. Simmons was wasted in this movie. Even in the beginning, when Kyle Reese and the original T-800, when they first arrived in 1984, it's really a shot-by-shot remake of the first movie, and that just felt out of place. And even the action in this movie is not really memorable. Like it had a couple of good action scenes. Hey, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some action scenes that I actually enjoyed. But honestly, the action scenes, they don't really hold up to the action scenes in the previous movies. Really, the only memorable scenes was when Arnold was thrown down with one of the other Terminators. And in the end, Terminator Genisys it was just okay. It's not terrible, but it was a really disappointing movie. Aside from Arnold Schwarzenegger, Emilia Clarke, and a couple of cool action scenes, this movie was a mess and did nothing to bring anything fresh to the table. It started off good, but then it went a completely different direction, and then another completely different direction, and tried to be too big for its own good. I'm gonna give Terminator Genisys a D+, for it's okay, but you're not gonna have any desire to watch it again after the first time. I also want to give a giant fuck you to James Cameron, because he said that this movie is just as good as the Terminator movies that he directed. I don't know whether, if he really thinks that, either he's lost his mind, or he's probably just saying that to get people excited so that he can set the people that made Terminator Genisys up for failure, so that whenever he gets the rights back and he makes a Terminator movie, it'll be good again and people will be way excited for it or whatever. But yeah, they said that James Cameron gets the rights back to the Terminator within 3 years, but by the time that happens, he'll be too busy making Avatar movies. So we probably wouldn't be getting a new Terminator movie from him anytime soon. Look, I'm done talking about this. I'm done talking about Terminator Genisys, and that's all I got to say about that. So, I'd say better luck next time, but I don't think there should be a next time. Because until we get James Cameron back as the director of these movies, this franchise is dead until further notice. And that is my question to you all. What did you think of Terminator Genisys? Do you think the Terminator franchise can be salvaged, or do you think, no, they just need to stop? The series has had its run, it's run its course, just let it go, just let it die, that's it. Tell me what you think. Let me know in the comment section below. That's it for the day. If you like what you see, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my other channel. The links are in the description below. And be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Movie Pilot, and Periscope. Peace.